YOLO composing gloves here, and today we're going to be taking a look at snap-ins. These are the effects that Kilohearts offers that sort of run in their engines, and we're going to be looking at these things. I'm going to probably toss them in the phase plant video series because I'm going to be demoing mostly in that context, but these things run in the snap heap and multipass as well, and one day those things will be integrated into phase plant, so it's like phase plant is going to be a monster. It already is a monster. But we're going to do these in groups and cover techniques. So sometimes I'll cover details of what stuff does, but a lot of these things are already pretty fundamental. So I'll point you towards the Sound and Synth Basic series. Today we're going to be covering the 3-band EQ and the filters. And I'm going to assume you know a bit about EQs and a bit about filters. You know what, like, for example, Q is. And if you don't, Sound and Synth Basic series is the place for you to go check it out. We're going to be looking at techniques because that's going to be just more useful. Because why would you grab a certain thing at a certain time? Like, how would you know what to grab? What are those things used for? So that's what we're going to be looking at. So I have two patches here. And fun side thing, if you hold down the notes, it does this tape stop thing. It's very amusing to me. And that's because I've got a tape stop linked up to an envelope generator down there. And that's what's going on there. So we're going to look at two techniques with 3-band EQ. These things aren't generally too mind-blowing. Like, some of you may already know these. And then we're going to look at filters and their general uses. Now, should be noted, you can get a 3-band EQ just by combining multiple filters. And a lot of people actually do it that way. They hardly ever grab this. And in the Discord, I fought for the 3-band EQ. I was like, long live the 3-band EQ. And some people are like, nah, bro. It's all about adding the two shelves and a peak. So they'll just run 3 of these in a row. And arguably, you get more control over it because you have direct control over the Q and things. So there's some advantages, but then you have 3 things open. So I favor the simplicity of this a lot of the time. So the two techniques I generally grab the 3-band EQ for are, the first is tonal shaping, general EQ work. So if I have a sound here, I wanted to bring up the mid-range because that just brought up a little bit of warmth and took away a little bit of the brightness. And if we go play higher here. Now we'll turn it on. That was just something that I really liked that it added to the sound. Just a small little tonal shaping move. If we come over to the next patch, this is the noise bass patch from earlier. And just as a reminder, it's just noise that's coming in. The rest is effects. So the EQ in this patch, where are you? Are you down here? You're down here. Has a different job. This EQ is for frequency level gain staging, or just like driving something harder is another way of saying it. So here, if I turn this off and play sound, it sounds a lot more muffled, dull. There's the potential in there, though. I just have to help it hit this distortion a little bit better. It's not quite living up to it. So what I do is I turn it on and say, you can do it mid and high frequencies, because that's where I want it. I can hear the shimmer in there. And it makes a surprising difference when you do that, how it hits the distortion. So a lot of times I actually toss the distortion down, add an EQ after the fact, trying to get it to play with the distortion a little nicer. You know what I'm saying? So those are the two things you'd use a 3-band EQ for that I typically grab them for. Other things, I'm usually going to grab a filter. So filters are pretty cool. They do have a couple limitations. Like, let me show you. So if you pull open a filter and load it up here, notice there is no like band control. You don't have like a slope control. That's one control that I kind of wish was there. Like, for example, here, I can't change this bandwidth. So if my sound doesn't jive with this particular bandwidth, that's kind of like too bad for you. So there's other things. There's ways you can get around this that I use. So for example, it's not in this particular patch. Oh no, it is in this patch, sort of. They're separated. So I have a low pass and a high pass, and then the band is where they overlap. So that's one way of doing it and making this sort of do exactly what I want it to. So that's how I'll walk around them. I'll sort of combine units of these things together. I guess that's sort of a technique on its own. And you could grab the carve EQ or the slice EQ to sort of sidestep this, but I think they're more difficult to work with in regards to what I want to do. So a very common technique done with filters is you automate them. That's like what filters are for. So the first thing is they shave crap off. So if you have like the low end you really don't want touched at all, you could just straight up shave it off with a filter. I grab the 3-band EQ a lot of the time for this, but in this case, if you really know exactly what you want, you just grab the filter module and then bam, you're set to go. So besides that, moving it around is a great way to shape the volume envelope of a sound. So here's a volume envelope. The thing about this volume envelope though is it processes the entire sound all at once. And so every frequency is affected and that creates a certain effect. But if, for example, if you wanted to make like a housey pluck, generally done with the low pass filter clamping down, acting as the volume envelope. So here, a similar method's being taken where I have filters moving. Not this filter, but this one is. Where are you? And it's clamping down on the spectrum, acting as an envelope. And I actually have envelopes down here generating these things. And that creates a very specific volume profile, frequency profile that gives the sounds, their characteristics. So definitely something you want to mess with is modulation on these. That's one reason I'll grab a filter over EQ. However, you can modulate the EQs, and sometimes I'll actually modulate the crossovers. You can get some pretty weird things in combination with disperser if you mess with it just right. But I'm not going to show that today. We'll talk about that when we get to disperser. Another very common thing is just general movement in a sound. So when I play a note, we see that there's this sort of resonance peak. That's because I wasn't vibing the cue so much on these guys. I wanted a broader cue that just sort of moved around a bit different. It does get a little pinchy right here, but I don't usually hold the note for that long, so it's not an issue. And it's just creating general resonance. That's another great use for an EQ. So I'm automating both the cutoff and the cue, or modulating, I mean to say. Now over here, I also have a filter acting as something that clamps down, and you hear that little wah, wah, like at the end, that extra resonance. If I were to turn this off, that's what we have. So these are really, really important. And if we come over here, I have another one. I think this might have been an experiment that I just didn't enjoy. So I set it back to basically what it was. But anyways, very common use, especially with the cue moving around. It can create some really nice drives. This also is very useful for running into a distortion. It's how you get those acid bass sounds. You drive the resonance up and then you hit a distortion. Or some distortions actually have like filters built into them and they've got the resonance all integrated and they can work like that. But you can also simulate it by doing that as well. So there's a couple things about the 3-band EQ and the filter. Hopefully you've got some ideas. You can go ahead and try them out. Let's go ahead and make a patch real quick and put these things to use, right? So let's go ahead. Let's just drive up an analog oscillator. Let's give it some unison. Let's make a pluck. What the heck? So let's grab a filter and let's keep it as a low pass. We will add an envelope. I'm moving it a bit quick because hopefully this is making sense to you. I'm going to modulate it with this envelope. Move the cutoff up. Whoops, modulated the wrong way. Cool, we'll bring the attack up. Let's bring this up. Let's make something like big. Cool. And now what we're going to do is let's go ahead and grab a reverb. I would like reverb, please. All right. We're just going to run with the general stuff. I'm going to close this. Actually, let's try a bit of resonance. Maybe not that much, a little less. Somewhere right in there. So let's go ahead. Let's try out a distortion. Yeah, let's see how a distortion would play. We're getting loud now, so we might just... The sine is always such an interesting one to me. I kind of like sine. Let's go with that one. Let's add on a 3-band EQ. This time is kind of just for the heck for it. I don't have like, this probably wouldn't have occurred to me if I didn't do the tutorial. So low end, let's just remove that. We'll change the crossover. And as a fun experiment, let's go ahead and add an LFO. And this LFO, we will link to the crossover. And I like that. We'll turn off retrigger. Now, you know what? What retrigger is going to be kind of important for this sound. Let's toss a disperser in there because I mentioned it earlier. This can sometimes end up being pretty weird, especially depending on what settings you put in here. And let's take the same LFO and move the disperser cutoff or the disperser frequency selection, whatever you want to call it. Let's be a little less aggressive with this. All right, now that we have this sort of going, I think I'm going to toss the reverb like on lane 3. This could be kind of a cool bass sound. And one more filter, perhaps. This time we'll bring the cutoff way up. Make it a band notch filter. What the heck instead? And this one, I'm going to, this time, load up a random generator and just sort of use this to just sort of move it around all over the place. Move the cutoff. It'd be kind of cool if this had the link up here. It's just a quality of life kind of a thing. That'd be a cool improvement. Just as far as like, I think it would be intuitive. I don't know. Drop what you think in the comments down below. They're doing a billion other things though that are more important. So I just think that would be kind of cool. Okay, so we're just gonna do this. Let's have it move around. Maybe not that fast. Slower, yeah, whatever. I basically put it back. Let's see what it would sound like if we really, let's dial it down. Let's do the same thing. We'll clone it. Whoops. You control drag. And we will move this up some. So now we're getting 2 areas. Nice. I dig it. You know, we're going to call it right there. So it's just a bunch of 3-band filter. Did a little bit of gain staging along the way, sorta. And we got a cool sound out. So if you have any questions about this, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.